The night Emeka Okafor became a billionaire, he was barefoot, bleeding, and standing alone in the middle of a forest that no one from his village ever returned from alive. And the morning after, he drove a brand new Mercedes through the same village that had buried him in shame just 48 hours before. But here's the part nobody talks about. Here's the part his own mother took to her grave. There was a price. There was always a price. And the day Emeka forgot the one rule, the one name he was never, ever supposed to say out loud, everything he had built, everything he had loved began to disappear. Not slowly, not quietly, all at once, like smoke in harmattan wind. This is not a story about money. This is a story about what happens when a desperate man makes a deal with something older than his grandfather's grandfather. Something that lives in the trees, something that was here before the first Nigerians set foot on this soil, something that does not forget and does not forgive. My people, stay with me, because this story is going to shake you. If you enjoy powerful, thrilling African stories that carry real emotions and real culture, do us a favor right now. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, ring that notification bell so you never miss a story, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from. Your support is the fuel that keeps these stories alive. We see every single comment. Now, let us go. Emeka grew up in Umuleke, a small village in the eastern part of Nigeria, the kind of place where the roads turned to red mud after every rain, where the only light at night came from kerosene lamps, and where a man's worth was measured by how many yam bands he had. His father, Emeka Okafor, was respected. Not rich, respected. There is a difference. He had a voice in the village meetings. He had 3 wives, 11 children, and a piece of land that had been in the family for 6 generations. People greeted him first when they entered a gathering. That meant something. Emeka was his first son, and in Igbo culture, the first son carries everything. The name, the land, the responsibility, the expectation, the weight of it all. From the time Emeka could walk, his father told him, "You will be greater than me. That is your duty." And Emeka believed it. He studied hard. He was sharp, quick, the kind of boy whose teacher would tell his parents, "This one is different." He passed his exams. He got admission to the university in Enugu. His father sold 2 plots of land to pay the fees. And then the money ran out. Emeka spent 3 years at that university, surviving on garri and water, borrowing notebooks, wearing the same 3 shirts in rotation, watching his classmates arrive in their father's cars while he trekked 40 minutes to lecture halls. He did not complain. He told himself, "This is temporary. This is a season. I will get through this." He graduated, 2nd class upper. Good results. He moved to Lagos with 45,000 naira in his pocket and a dream so big it barely fit inside his chest. That was where Lagos met him. And Lagos does not care about your dreams. For 4 years, Emeka knocked on every door that would open and many that would not. He applied for jobs. He got interviews. He would show up sharp, well-spoken, confident. And then, nothing. Either the job went to someone whose uncle knew the director, or the salary was so low it could not cover his rent, or they simply never called back. Lagos is a city that eats people, and it was starting to eat Emeka Okafor. He tried business. He sold phone accessories in Alaba. He lost money. He sold foodstuff in Mile 12. He was cheated by his partner. He drove Uber for 8 months until the car was repossessed. Every time he thought he had found a door, it slammed in his face. And then, his father died. The news came on a Tuesday morning. Emeka received the call while he was sitting in a Moluwe bus heading to Oshodi for a job interview he already knew he would not get. He heard his mother's voice on the phone, that sound a mother makes when something is broken beyond repair, and he knew before she said the words. Emeka Okafor was gone. Emeka came home for the burial, and that is when the second blow landed, the one he did not see coming. His uncle, his father's younger brother, Kelechi, had already taken possession of the compound, the land, the yam barns, even his mother's kitchen utensils. He had gone to the village elders and presented documents that nobody had seen before, documents that said the land had been signed over to him years ago. The elders looked at the papers, they looked at Kelechi's expensive agbada, they looked at the gifts he had brought, bottles of schnapps, envelopes of money, and they nodded their heads. Emeka stood up in that meeting and said, "This is a lie. My father never signed anything over to this man." Kelechi looked at his nephew the way a cat looks at a mouse it has already decided to eat. He said, "Emeka, you have been in Lagos chasing nothing for years, while I was here taking care of your father. Sit down, boy. You have nothing to stand on." And the elders said nothing, because Kelechi had money, and Emeka had none. His own cousins, his own blood, stood behind his uncle and looked away. His mother wept quietly in the corner. His siblings looked at the floor. And Emeka Okafor, first son of Mazi Okafor, the boy who was supposed to be greater, walked out of that compound with the clothes on his back and nowhere to go. That night, he sat under the udara tree at the edge of the village, the same tree he used to climb as a boy, and he asked God a question that many of us have asked in our darkest moments. Why? Why is my life like this? What did I do? What did my father do? Why do the wicked always win? And then an old woman appeared. Now, pay careful attention here. This is where the story turns. Nobody knew this old woman's name. The children in the village called her Mama Ago, mother of snakes, because wherever she walked, you never saw or heard a snake. Not out of fear, out of respect. Even the animals of the forest gave her a wide path. She was ancient, the kind of ancient where you could not tell if she was 70 or 170. Her eyes were the color of deep river water, dark, still, and full of things moving beneath the surface that you could not see. She sat beside Emeka under the udara tree, like she had been waiting for him. She said, in a voice that sounded like it came from inside the earth rather than from her throat, "You are bleeding, my son, not from your skin, from your soul." Emeka looked at her. He was not afraid. He was too tired to be afraid. He said, "Old woman, I don't know you. Please leave me alone." She said, "I know you. I know your grandfather before your father was born. I know the sound your family's pain makes. It has been making that sound for a long time." Something about the way she said that made Emeka go still. She continued, "The forest can hear you. It has been listening to your family for 3 generations, and tonight it is ready to answer. Now listen. In Igbo culture, there is a belief that is older than Christianity, older than Islam, older even than the first missionary who ever stepped on African soil. It is the belief that the forest is alive, not just with trees and animals, but with spirits, presences, ancient forces that existed long before human beings started giving things names. Some of these forces are indifferent to us. Some are dangerous, and some, just some, can be moved by the kind of suffering that is so pure, so undeserved, that even the spirit world takes notice. The old woman told Emeka that there was a place deep in Oji Forest, the same forest that people from his village had been warned about since before their great-grandparents were born, where one of these ancient presences lived. A spirit so old it had no human name. The villagers simply called it Oji, the same name as the forest, not because the forest was named after it, because the spirit had always been there and everything else had grown around it. She said, "Oji has watched your family. It watched your grandfather beg. It watched your father struggle. And it has watched you carry more weight than any man your age should carry. Go to the center of the forest tonight. Go alone. Kneel at the roots of the oldest Iroko tree you find. Tell Oji your pain, all of it. Hold nothing back, and listen." Emeka looked at this old woman and said, "And I want you to hear this because it tells you everything about who he was." He said, "And if the forest kills me?" She smiled, a slow, patient smile, and she said, "Then at least your suffering will be over." He thought about that for a long time, and then he stood up and he walked into Oji Forest. The moment he crossed the tree line, the village sounds disappeared, not faded, disappeared, like someone had pressed a button. No crickets, no frogs, no wind, just silence so complete it had a texture to it, like you could reach out and touch it. He walked for what felt like hours. The forest was dark in a way that darkness in a city can never be. Not black, but deep, layered, alive. Trees taller than buildings, roots that rose from the ground like the backs of sleeping giants, and a smell, not bad, not good, just ancient, like old earth and old rain and old time all pressed together. And then he found it. The Iroko tree. He knew it the moment he saw it, the way you know certain things without being told. It was enormous, so wide that 10 men holding hands could not circle its trunk, so tall that its top disappeared into the dark sky above. And around its roots, and this is the part that made Emeka's breath stop, around its roots, the ground was completely dry, perfectly dry, in a forest wet with the night dew. Around this one tree, a perfect circle of dry red earth. Emeka walked to that tree. He knelt down, and he did what the old woman said. He talked. He talked about his father, about the shame of watching a good man be buried poor, about his uncle's betrayal, about Lagos, about the jobs that never came, about garri and water for dinner, about wearing the same shirt 3 days in a row and praying nobody noticed, about the loneliness of being the one everyone was counting on while having nobody to lean on, about the night he sat in a bus in Lagos and cried into his shirt so nobody would hear him, about feeling like he was disappearing, like he was becoming nothing. He talked for a long time, and when he was done, the forest was still silent. He waited, and then the Iroko tree moved, not from wind, from itself, a slow, deep tremble that traveled from its roots up into the ground beneath Emeka's knees, and he felt it in his chest and in his bones and in the back of his skull. And a voice came, not from the tree, not from the air, from everywhere at once, from inside and outside simultaneously, the way music fills a room. Deep, unhurried, the voice of something that had been alive so long it had forgotten what it felt like to be young. It said one word. It said, "Rise." Emeka rose, and then Oji spoke. It did not speak in full sentences the way we do. It spoke in images and feelings that landed in Emeka's mind like stones dropped into still water. But the meaning was clear. The meaning was this: Oji had watched, Oji had seen, and Oji had decided that the Okafor bloodline had suffered long enough. The forest would give Emeka what he needed, not just money, the right connections, the right timing, the right ideas arriving at the right moments. Doors would open, not because Emeka was lucky, because something ancient and powerful had decided to stand behind him. But there was a condition. There is always a condition. The condition was this: the name of the spirit, the true name, the one that existed before human language, was never to be spoken by Emeka, not in celebration, not in anger, not in prayer, not even in a whisper to himself in a dark room. If that name ever left his mouth, the contract would be over. Everything given would be taken back, and something else, something Oji did not describe, but that filled Emeka's mind with a cold he had never felt before. Something else would come. Emeka asked, "How will I know the name if I am not supposed to say it?" And Oji planted the name in his mind, the way a seed is planted in soil. Emeka felt it land there, felt it take root, and immediately felt the weight of it, this thing he was now carrying that could never, under any circumstances, leave his lips. He nodded. He said, "I accept." And the forest exhaled. He walked out of Oji Forest as the sun was coming up. His feet were bleeding from the walk. His clothes were torn. His eyes were red. But inside his chest, for the first time in as long as he could remember, there was something that felt like peace. Like the specific peace that comes when you have been drowning and you finally touch the bottom and push back up. He did not know exactly how it would happen. He just knew something had changed. It happened fast, faster than he could have planned. 3 days after he returned to Lagos, a former classmate he had not heard from in years called him out of nowhere. This classmate had started a real estate company. He needed a partner, someone smart, someone he could trust. He offered Emeka a deal that made no logical sense, a 20% equity stake for almost nothing down. Emeka said yes. Within 6 months, that company had landed a government contract that shocked everyone in the industry. Within 1 year, Emeka bought his first car, cash. Within 2 years, his name was starting to appear in conversations at business events. Within 3 years, he was the kind of man who other men introduced themselves to. And he never forgot Oji. He went back to the forest every year on the anniversary of that night. He brought kola nut, obi abata, and palm wine, the traditional offerings. He knelt at the iroko tree. He said nothing. Just knelt and felt that same deep tremble come up through the ground. And each time on his drive back, a new idea or a new connection would arrive that would push his business to the next level. People in Lagos started to ask, how is Emeka Okafor doing this? He was nobody 5 years ago. Now he has a private jet. Now he's building estates in Abuja. How? Some said he had good timing. Some said he was simply brilliant. Some said he had connections. Some said he was lucky. Nobody said the right thing. His mother moved out of that rented room she had been surviving in since his uncle took the compound. Emeka built her a house, a proper house with running water and a generator that never ran out of fuel. He bought it in her name. He put her name on the gate in letters you could see from the road. He went back to Umuleke with a convoy of cars. His uncle, Iche Kelechi, came to greet him, wearing a big smile and an expensive agbada, saying, my son, I always knew you would make it," reaching out his hand. Emeka looked at that hand for a long time. And then he shook it, calmly, without a word, because he had already given instructions to his lawyers, and the case for the recovery of his father's land was already filed in 3 different courts. The village watched and did not say a word. But justice, real justice, does not rush. It arrives. Emeka got his father's land back within 18 months. The elders who had sided with his uncle came to apologize. They brought drinks. They used the kind of respectful language that men in Igbo culture use when they are admitting they were wrong, without quite saying the words. Emeka received them. He fed them. He gave them kola nut and wine. And when they left, he stood on that land, his family's land, the land his grandfather had farmed, the land his father had loved, and he stood there alone for a long time. He was not angry anymore. He was not sad. He was something heavier and quieter than both, something that does not have a simple name. Now, I need you to understand something about success and the human mind, because this is where the story begins to break apart. This is where Emeka started walking toward the edge without knowing the ground was ending. When a man suffers for long enough, he develops a kind of survival instinct that is sharp and careful and always watching. He does not take anything for granted. He remembers where he came from. He is grateful. But when that same man has been successful for long enough, and I mean the kind of success that makes other powerful people treat you with deference, something starts to shift. Not all at once, slowly. The way a large ship changes direction, you do not feel the turn until you look up and the horizon is completely different from where you started. Emeka started to change. It was not obvious, not to him, not to the people around him. He still went to church. He still called his mother every Sunday. He still went back to the Iroko tree every year. But the man who knelt at that tree in the 5th year of his wealth, he was different from the man who had knelt there in the 1st year. In the 1st year, Emeka had knelt with his full heart open, genuinely humbled. In the 5th year, he knelt because it was on his calendar. He got married. Her name was Adaeze, and she was the kind of woman that the word beautiful is too small for. Educated, sharp, from a good family in Anambra. She matched Emeka in every room he ever walked into. They had a wedding that people in Lagos talked about for 2 years afterward. They had 2 sons. They lived in a house in Banana Island that made other rich people uncomfortable. Life was extraordinary. And then came the night of the party. It was his 40th birthday. Emeka threw a celebration at a luxury hotel in Victoria Island that had 1,500 guests. Politicians, business leaders, celebrities, pastors, foreign investors. The kind of event where the canapes alone cost more than most people's monthly salary. His wife wore a gown that had been custom made in Paris. His 2 sons sat in the front row and watched their father receive a standing ovation from 1,500 people. Emeka stood at that podium and looked out at that room, at all those faces looking up at him, at all that light and music and wealth gathered in his name. And something happened in his chest, something proud and full, and this is the word I need you to hold on to, something careless. He started his speech. He talked about his journey, the village, the suffering, Lagos, the hustle, his father. He had people wiping tears. He had people nodding and clapping. He was magnetic. He was everything. And then, and I believe he did not even realize he was doing it, he said, I want to thank everyone who has helped me get here, my family, my team, and the force that started it all, the one I met in Oji Forest on the darkest night of my life. The room was listening. He smiled. He was emotional. He was in the moment. The music of the night was inside him. And he said, the one they call, and he spoke the name. The forbidden name. The one planted in him like a seed. The one he had carried for 11 years without ever once letting it near his lips. The name that Oji had said must never, under any circumstances, leave his mouth. He said it clearly, into a microphone, in front of 1,500 people, amplified through speakers so powerful the sound carried out into the Lagos night and across the water. The moment the name left his tongue, Emeka stopped speaking. Not because someone stopped him, because every single light in the building went out, all at once. 1,500 people in complete darkness for exactly 7 seconds. And then, the lights came back. And Emeka was standing at the podium with his mouth still open, and his wife was looking at him from the front row with an expression he had never seen on her face before. Not fear, not confusion, something deeper, like recognition of something terrible. The crowd laughed nervously. Someone said it was a power cut. The music started again. People went back to their food and drinks. The night continued. But Emeka did not continue. Something inside him had gone very, very quiet. That night, driving home, he said nothing. Adaeze asked him twice if he was all right. He said yes, but his hands on the steering wheel were cold, and the name was gone from his mind. The place where it had lived for 11 years was empty. Not like something had been removed, like it had never been there, like the seed had been pulled out by its roots. He told himself it meant nothing. He woke up the next morning to a call from his business partner. The government contract, the big one, the one that kept their entire operation running, had been cancelled. Not reduced, cancelled, effective immediately. No explanation that made any sense. He told himself it was politics. These things happened. 2 days later, his most trusted account manager was arrested for fraud. Not petty fraud, the kind of fraud that, when the investigators started pulling the threads, would unravel things Emeka did not even know were being done in his name. He told himself it would be sorted out. A week after the party, his wife came to him with documents she had found. Documents about a property deal he had signed years ago, one he barely remembered, that had been mishandled. The amount involved was enough to destroy 3 companies, and his signature was on every page. He told himself he could manage it. But by the 2nd month after his birthday party, Emeka Okafor could no longer tell himself anything, because the evidence was too much. The walls were moving in from every direction at once. The court cases, the business losses, the frozen accounts, the partners who suddenly stopped returning calls, the investors who quietly withdrew. The same people who had stood and applauded him at his birthday party were now carefully removing their names from his orbit. And his sons, his 2 boys, started to have problems at school. The kind of problems that had no medical explanation. The kind that made the school counselor call Adaize in for a meeting and say, carefully in professional language, something is affecting these children, something we cannot identify. Adaize came home from that meeting, sat across from her husband, and said the thing wives say when they have finally had enough of the gentle approach. She said, "Emeka, what did you do in that forest?" He looked at his wife, the woman he loved, the mother of his children, and he told her everything. Everything. The old woman under the Udara tree, the walk into Oji forest, the Iroko tree, the tremble, the voice, the deal, the name, the 11 years of carrying it, and the birthday party, the microphone, the speakers, the name leaving his lips in front of 1,500 people. When he finished, Adaize was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, in a voice so steady it frightened him, "We need to go back." Now, this is the part of the story where everything you think you understand about what is happening gets complicated. Because going back to Oji Forest as a desperate man with nothing was one thing. Going back as a man who had broken a sacred covenant, that was something else entirely. Emeka's mother, when he told her what he planned to do, grabbed his arm with both of her old hands and said, "My son, I will not stop you, but know this, whatever you face there this time, it will not be the same as what you faced before. You went the first time empty, you are going this time owing." He listened, he nodded, and he went. He went alone. Adaize wanted to come, he said no. He walked into Oji Forest on the same night of the year he had first entered, the anniversary, 11 years later. Barefoot, by choice, the way he had come the first time. He did not bring anything, no kola nut, no palm wine, just himself. And he walked. The forest was different this time. Not darker, something beyond dark that had no word for it. Colder. Not cold like air, cold like the absence of something that should be there. He found the Iroko tree. But the circle of dry earth around it was gone. The ground was wet, dark. The roots were covered in something he did not want to look at too closely. And the tree, the same enormous tree he had knelt before 11 years ago, was silent. No tremble. He knelt anyway. He said out loud into the cold, dark forest, "I know what I did. I am not here to pretend otherwise. I am here to ask if there is a way back." The forest stayed silent for so long that Emeka began to believe that whatever he had come to find was simply no longer there, that the silence itself was the answer, that some things, once broken, cannot be unbroken. And then the old woman appeared. Mama Agwo, the same woman who had sent him here 11 years ago, standing among the roots of the Iroko tree the way she had stood under the Odara tree in the village, as if no time had passed, as if she was exactly the same person. She looked at him and she said, "You spoke the name." He said, "Yes." She said, "Do you know why?" He started to say it was a mistake, that he was emotional, that it slipped out. But even as the words came, he stopped himself because it was not fully true and Mama Agwo would know. So he told the truth. He said, "Because in that moment, I wanted people to know. I had been carrying this secret for 11 years. I had been kneeling at this tree in secret, going back and forth in secret, and in front of 1,500 people celebrating me. I wanted them to know where it really came from. I wanted the credit to be real. I wanted to be seen." Mama Agwo looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "That is honest." She sat down on one of the roots, like a grandmother settling in for a long story. She said, "Oji does not punish vanity. It does not care about your pride. But a covenant is not a suggestion. It is the shape of the agreement. When you said that name, you did not just break a rule. You changed the shape. And when the shape changes, what was inside it spills out." He said, "Is it gone? All of it?" She said, "What was given can always be withdrawn. That is the nature of gifts from the old world. But withdrawal is not destruction. The wealth is gone for now. The question is whether the foundation is still there." She looked at him carefully. "Are you still the same man who walked in here 11 years ago? The one whose suffering was pure enough to move a forest?" Emeka thought about that question, honestly, for a long time. He thought about the man he had been under the Odara tree, hollow, grieving, carrying nothing but pain and hunger and love for a family that was slipping away from him. He thought about the man at the podium, full, applauded, carried by the warmth of 1,500 people's admiration. He thought about which one of those men had forgotten what mattered. And quietly, without performance, without trying to impress, he began to cry. Not the way a man cries when he wants comfort. The way a man cries when he finally sees himself clearly and he does not like what he sees. The way a man cries when he has been running from something true and he has finally stopped and turned around to face it. He said, "I am not the same man. I changed. I started to believe I was the source of my own success. I started to think the forest was something I had earned rather than something I had been given." He said, "I became my uncle." That last sentence, "I became my uncle," landed in the forest with a weight that pressed against the trees. And somewhere in the dark, above the Iroko tree, something moved. Not wind, not animal, something. The tremble came, faint, much fainter than before, like a heartbeat barely beating, but it came, and Mama Agwo said, "It hears you." She said the path back is not the same path you came in on. Going forward is always different from going back. Oji will not give you what he gave you before in the same way, but there is a path. It starts with your uncle. Emeka froze. "My uncle?" She said, "The first injustice that brought you here, your uncle's betrayal. You recovered the land through the courts, but you never faced him man to man. You never looked him in the eye and said what needed to be said. You took the land back. You did not heal the wound." She said, "Go to Ichia Kelechi, not as his enemy, not as the man who beat him in court. Go as his nephew. Go as a son of your father's house and speak the truth, all of it, not for him, for the wound." Emeka said, "And then?" She said, "And then come back here." He walked out of that forest as the sun rose, again, just like the first time. But this time, there was no peace in his chest. There was just something that felt like the beginning of a very long, very hard road. He drove to Umuleke the following weekend. His uncle was old now, smaller than Emeka remembered, sitting in a compound that was shabby and quiet. 3 of his children had moved abroad, and the others rarely visited. Ichie Kelechi had spent his stolen wealth the way stolen wealth always gets spent, carelessly, quickly, on nothing that lasted. He saw Emeka come through the gate, and his whole body went tense. Emeka sat down across from him. He did not bring gifts. He did not bring lawyers. He brought just himself. He said, "Uncle, I am not here to fight you. I am not here to shame you. I won the court case. I have the land. This is not about any of that." Ichie Kelechi said nothing. His eyes were watchful, the eyes of a man who had spent years preparing for a blow that had not come yet. Emeka said, "I came to ask you one question, and I need the honest answer, not the answer you would give the elders, the real one." He said, "Did you love my father?" The old man's face moved. Something happened behind his eyes. Something that had been held in a closed fist for a very long time suddenly shifted. After a long silence, Ichie Kelechi said in a voice much quieter than the voice of the man who had humiliated Emeka at the village meeting, "He was my brother. Of course I loved him." Emeka said, "Then why?" Another long silence, and then the old man said something that Emeka had not expected. He said, "Because he was always first. From the time we were children, he was always first, and nobody ever saw me. Nobody ever asked how Kelechi was doing. It was always Emeka's father, Emeka's father, Emeka's father." He stopped. He swallowed. "When he died for the first time, I had the chance to be first, to be the one that people looked to, and I took it. I took it in the worst way a man can take something, and I have not had a good night's sleep since." Emeka looked at his uncle for a long time. Then he said something that surprised even himself. He said, "I understand that feeling." He said, "I stood in front of 1,500 people at my own birthday party, and I threw away something sacred because I wanted to be seen, because I wanted to be first. You and I are more similar than I want to admit." Ichie Kelechi looked at his nephew with eyes that were wet. Emeka said, "I am not forgiving what you did because it was right. I am forgiving it because carrying it is killing us both. And my father, the man you loved, would not want either of us destroyed by it." They sat in that compound, uncle and nephew, for the rest of the afternoon. They talked about his father, real stories, good ones, the kind of memories that make you laugh and cry at the same time. By the time the sun went down, something between them had changed. Not fixed, changed, like a broken bone that is set correctly and beginning slowly to heal. Emeka drove back to Lagos. He called Adaize. He told her everything. She listened all the way through without interrupting, which is how he knew she understood the gravity of what had happened. She said, quietly, "What happens now?" He said, "I go back to the forest." He went back to Oji Forest 3 days later, and this time, before he even reached the Iroko tree, the ground began to tremble. Not faintly, fully. He stood in the middle of the forest as the earth moved beneath him, and the trees swayed without wind, and the air filled with that ancient smell. And he did not feel fear. He did not feel pride. He felt something that he would later try to describe to his wife and his mother and find that no words in English or Igbo were quite right for it. It was something like being held. Like the moment when a very young child is crying and their mother picks them up, and the child does not need to say anything, and the mother does not need to say anything, and just the holding is the whole answer. That is what the forest felt like. And Oji spoke again. That voice from everywhere and nowhere. It said, "You came back. Emeka said, I came back. It said, you are different from when you left. He said, I know. What came next was not a new deal, not a new set of conditions. Oji simply said, the gifts that were taken are beginning to move again. They will not arrive the same way. Nothing given twice arrives the same way, but they are moving. And then it said one more thing, one thing that Emeka would carry with him for the rest of his life. It said, do not seek to be seen. The forest saw you before anyone else did. That is enough. Emeka Okafor walked out of Oji Forest for the third time. This time, there was no Mercedes waiting. There was no convoy. There was no applause. There was just a man walking out of the trees as the first light touched the sky. Barefoot, alone, carrying something invisible that was heavier and more valuable than anything he had ever bought with money. The rebuilding took 4 years, and it was different from the building the first time. Slower, harder, more deliberate. Every step felt earned in a way that the first rise never had. He was more careful with people, more honest in his dealings. He turned down partners that felt wrong even when the money was good. He stopped needing to be in every photograph. His son's troubles at school stopped, quietly, without explanation. One morning, they simply woke up and they were fine, and they stayed fine. Adazi, years later, would say that the man she married after the collapse was a different man from the one who had proposed to her. Better, more present, the kind of man who noticed things, who came home and actually arrived, not just physically, but fully. His uncle, Iche Kelechi, died 3 years after the afternoon in the compound. On his deathbed, he sent for Emeka. He held his nephew's hand. He said only 3 words. He said, I am sorry. Emeka said, I know. And that was enough. By the time Emeka turned 50, he had rebuilt everything. Not the same way, not the same shape, but something real, something that had roots. He built a school in Umuleke. He named it after his father. He never went back to Oji Forest again after that 3rd visit. Not because he had forgotten, because some things, once completed, do not need to be revisited. Some contracts are fully honored not in a forest, but in the daily choices of an ordinary life. And the Iroko tree, people in the village say that on a clear night, if the wind is right and you are standing close enough to the forest edge, you can hear something deep in the trees, a low sound, like the earth breathing. They say it has always been there. They say it was there before the first person came, and it will be there long after the last one leaves. They say that sometimes, just sometimes, it sounds almost like it is satisfied. And Emeka Okafor, the billionaire from Umuleke, who lost everything and found it again, sits on the porch of his mother's house every December and listens to the wind coming from the direction of Oji Forest. And he does not speak. He just listens. Because some debts are paid not with money, not with ceremony, but with a life lived carefully, honestly, and without forgetting where you came from. And some forests remember everything. My people, if this story moved you even a little, do not let it end here. Hit that like button right now, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. Drop a comment and tell us where in the world you are watching from. Tell us what part of this story hit you the hardest. Was it Emeka's betrayal by his uncle? Was it the moment he spoke the forbidden name? Was it the conversation in the compound? We read every single comment. Everyone. This channel runs on your support, and we are deeply grateful for every one of you who stays until the end. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today, and we will see you in the next story.